Well, hello everyone. Hello everyone, and welcome to our second listening session. Thank you very much for being here. Just a little orientation. We asked you to take three things as you walked in. One is this piece of paper. On the front here, you'll find just a kind of a simple rundown of the process that the discernment team had been going through, just our different steps. I understand if it doesn't mean a lot to you, but we wanted to kind of show you that there is a process at work here. The other one is, the focus is what we are planning to do today, the purpose of this, and then kind of an agenda for our time together. If you turn the page, this is just the starting calendar of the discernment process. As you'll notice, we are not here yet. And so, as often happens, the plan went a little off plan. But I wanted to show you kind of what the schedule has been for this group and how they've been working. And on the back here are our purpose statement of what we started with wanting to do as a team. And then these are outcomes that the team has come up with over the last 2 months or so. So this is just that general information for you to have and take home. Then you have this. You may also have one of these stapled to the back of your packet, and that's okay too. These are 5 questions that we would really, really like everyone to answer. Whether you answer it today and leave this with us, you answer it sometime this week and turn it into either First Presbyterian office or Trinity office, or you can scan this little guy and it'll take you to an online version that you can fill out that'll come to us automatically. But it's a way for us to get feedback both on what you hear today and thoughts about the future of your congregations. This is the most important part of what we are doing today. So please fill it out and turn it in sometime in the next week. And then lastly, you got 2 what we're calling tokens. And we're going to have you use those tokens to place them into one of these buckets at the end of our meeting. We'll explain that more for you then, but go ahead and hang on to it in the meantime. Marley or anyone else on the discernment team, is there anything else I'm missing? Wonderful. I'm going to frame what we're doing here just a little bit. Some of you have already heard me talk about this in previous Sundays, but there's a story in Acts in which the Apostle Paul has been arrested, and he's been put on a ship, and that ship is going to go to Rome, where he's going to be put on trial. He's a citizen, it's his right, and on the ship is also a lot of grain and probably like metal ingots and things that Rome needs. And so they're about to take off, but it's taken them longer to get to the port than they expected, and the time of year has changed. And in this part of the Mediterranean, there's many different islands, and it's a very dangerous, very tricky voyage to take in the best of times. But now they've gotten to the part of year where almost nobody ever sails because it is just too hazardous, too unpredictable. And yet they decide to sail anyways. And before they do, Paul tells them, you guys shouldn't do this. And they say, quiet, prisoner, go downstairs, right? And so they go and they start to sail off, and pretty soon they hit a storm. And it's a big one. The storm lasts for like 2 weeks. And it explains in excruciating detail how they were trying to move and save the boat, and the boat kept being pushed by the currents closer and closer to the shore, to danger. They didn't even know what was there. It's too dark, too stormy. They couldn't see the stars, and it's getting pushed along. And at one point it says, and after 14 days, they were exhausted and they lost hope. And at that point, Paul stands up. And Paul says to them, basically, I had a dream, and in the dream, God said that nobody here would perish, that none of you would die, but the ship will have to be lost. And so he tells them to have hope. Now, if you're going to have hope, you generally don't say, you're all going to live, but you're going to lose everything you have, right? And yet, Paul understands the difference between hope and optimism, right? Optimism is passive. It'll be okay, whatever, and it's a hand waving. Hope is saying, this is going to be hard work, this is going to take sacrifice, but it will be worth it. Hope entrusts the future to something beyond ourselves. And so Paul is offering a realistic hope. God says you're all going to live, but you may lose the ship. And they hear this, and then he feeds them, and after they eat, they get up and they begin to move and to do things. And one of the things one group of sailors starts to do is they try to escape on one of the boats. They're like, if this thing is going down, we're getting out of here. And Paul turns to the soldiers that are there and he says, if anyone leaves, we will all perish. Basically, it's all or nothing. Either we stay together or there is nothing for us. And so the soldiers cut the ties of the boat and they send it off. They're all in this together. And then I'm trying to remember what happens next. And then at one point, the soldiers, because they don't want any of the prisoners to escape, they say, we're going to kill all the prisoners. And the commander says, no, we're not going to kill everyone. We're all going to stay together. And eventually they begin to see land. And so they're directed to basically take the boat apart, to ride these pieces of the boats out to land. And they land on a beach, and it says they landed on an island they did not know. But they are all together. They all live. And then the locals come out, and it turns out they're on Malta. And the locals, it says, showed them kindness and built them a fire and gave them food. And that's where the story ends. It's a story about what God really wants in the midst of everyone having different priorities. On this boat, you had the captain and the crew, and their priority is the cargo, because they're there to make some money. And they're willing to risk everything else, and so they push off into a storm at a time it's a good chance they're going to kill them, but they have their priorities, and they're following their priorities. The soldiers have their priorities. They're commanded to get these prisoners to Rome, or at least let no one escape. And so they're ready to kill all the prisoners to make sure that their duty and their role and their honor is protected, but also their lives, because if they lose prisoners, then Rome is going to have punishments for them later on. And in the midst of it, Paul stands up and he says, actually, God is here with us, but God only has one priority: life. That you will all live, but you have to stay together. You have to stay together. And then when he feeds them in a way it's described using the same words as communion, that he breaks bread and gives it to them. And suddenly they find hope in this communion. God is there among them. Even though none of them are religious and he doesn't do any of the rituals, the communion and the power is real. And once they have this hope, at that moment, the commander and the crew, they throw the grain and the rest of the stuff overboard. And the troops decide, we're not going to kill any of the prisoners. We'll take that risk. Everyone is willing to let go of their priorities for the promise of life, but they must stay together. I would offer for the church, it feels like we are in a storm, that we are pushed in a direction that we did not choose, and we don't know what's over there, but it all feels dangerous. And it feels like we're going to lose some stuff. Things are going to change. And perhaps God is still speaking to us. Stay together. Stay together. No life will be lost. Our church, we are congregation. There's a life in these churches. But we may have to let go of a lot of other things. Something may happen to the boat, whatever you want to consider that to be. And so we are here today to hone in on and to hear from you what is the most important things, what holds life that we might need to give all of our focus to and to build on. And we may have to do it all together or not at all. Stay together. Stay together. And so now the discernment team, what they've been doing is for months working on and thinking through and praying about what should our priorities be, with the goal of to take those priorities to brainstorm and to come up with a number of different proposals that will go to both churches and both leadership as a starting point of actual action, so that we can be hopeful, not just optimistic, so that we can make choices, not just maybe it'll get better next year. And now, with, as you know, Pastor Greg moving on to a new call and myself moving on to a new career, as well as budgetary questions, there's big, big questions and big, big risks. But this is where the Spirit has always moved. And so we are here to let you know the work we've been doing, what exactly we've come up with, and especially to hear from you. What are your priorities? What do you love? What is the boat? Discernment team, is there anything else that I'm missing? All right. I'm going to invite up Marley, and she's going to take us through the work that we've been doing for the last couple of months.
All right. Good morning. Afternoon. It's almost lunchtime. I don't miss meals. Well, first I want to welcome you all. This should be, the discernment group really wanted to do this and invite you all to listen and see where we've gone and where we've come. And I think that became clear when we started to realize our own minds have changed so much from our first meeting when we were sitting in the chairs, not knowing what we were getting ourselves into necessarily. But I think our first initial thoughts have changed so significantly that we felt like we wanted to bring you guys along on the trip as well. So you can understand where our thought processes have been and where they've gotten to. Yes, the goal of this group is to provide those proposals. You will not hear proposals today because we don't have those proposals yet. We're still in the middle of this process, and we felt like before we could really make a proposal or say this is what we want to do, we needed feedback from you guys. We felt like it was premature for us to make decisions without knowing what is important to the whole group, the whole congregations. So this discernment team, I will introduce us all in a second, were chosen, asked, and I think the goal of selecting us was to make sure that a variety of people were chosen, different mindsets, different kind of family looks, different generations. We've got mothers, we've got empty nesters, we've got families involved, older generation, younger generation. So I think the goal was to make sure that all the generations were kind of represented, all the family units were kind of there, to make sure that we were thinking of this all from the same angle. And so I want to try to remember everybody on the discernment group. Lynn Mullins was on the group. Judy Canton was somewhere. Yep. And then Kelsey Torgelson. Amy Tice is not here. Dan Sidarsky was on the group. Jared Quanrud. Myself. Did I forget anybody? Test complete. And so it's been a very awesome group, great group to work with, a lot of qualities, a lot of opinions, and a lot of thoughts. It's been really good. As we move through today, I really encourage you to not think about what church looks like now. What does faith and your faith journey look like now? What could it be? And so I really encourage you to have an open mind and think beyond what we're doing right now. And keep in mind that this is all 100% to get your feedback. I think this committee is really looking for you guys to share your thoughts, your feelings, your goals of what church should be and could be for you and your family. Again, Mike kind of said it, I want to address the elephant in the room. Yes, we started this process, and we were starting this process with two full-time pastors, and now we kind of sit here with not that. And so I know your concerns and your comments and your heaviest thing on your heart and mind is that. And those are conversations that need to happen and will happen, but that's not the goal today. The goal today is to talk about what we've worked through so far, and keeping in mind, because I think when we all heard the news that those two were moving on, we were like, well, this process is done. And then as we stewed on it a little bit, I think we truly realized this process is more important now than ever, because as we look at doing call processes or hiring a new one, we need to know who we are and what we want to be. Trinity hasn't, First Press, we've been in the call process not that long ago, unfortunately, and so we've maybe talked a little bit of who we are and what's important to us, but Trinity probably hasn't really looked in those processes or those priorities since prior to calling Pastor Greg, and that started 15 years ago. And so who you guys want to be might be different. Churches have changed significantly the last couple of years, or the last how many years, and so we want to really enjoy this process in defining who we are and what we want to be and what we want to offer to our congregation members and our brothers and sisters in Christ. And so that's what we're doing. This process is still more important now than ever. So let's go on to the next slide. This is just the agenda of what we're going to talk about today. And that's also printed in your handout. So I think we can switch. First of all, we'll just start out with what discernment is. Discernment is a process of prayerful reflection and decision-making that seeks to understand and align one's will with God's will. It involves listening to both internal and external guidance to make choices that align with faith, values, and spiritual good. We've had numerous conversations and done numerous activities. You can see all these sticky notes and boards and different things like that. We won't walk through all of them today, but I do encourage you to look at them. We've done a lot of work and a lot of conversations, so I encourage you to look at them and see what you think. So we started our journey with a kind of Bible or a book study of When Church Stops Working. I know First Presbyterian did this as a book study not that long ago, and so I know some of you guys have dug deep into this book as well as us as a discernment team. And this book is geared towards pastors and church councils and different things like that to help kind of understand why church is not meeting the needs of families and folks and different things like that, and why churches need to adapt with time. I think one of my favorite kind of analogies that came from it was in chapter 1, when it talked about churches have been struggling since 1970, and so how do we've always asked ourselves the questions of, why are our pledges getting less? Why are there fewer bodies in the church? That's been happening for a significant amount of time, and so we've been trying to address those by offering more and doing more and doing this and doing that and trying to get more people involved. But those are, in the medical world, those would be treating the symptoms. And so trying to get more, doing more and offering more is kind of the symptoms of what we're doing, and it's causing burnout and people spread too thin, as opposed to digging into the actual health issue, the actual diagnosis of why is faith not as high of a priority to families anymore. And so it was, to me, I loved that analogy of it, but it also talked about this discernment process should be a waiting and guidance and listening and watch words and different things like that and phrases. And so we started with educating ourselves and finding, I was hoping there was a chapter 9 that had all the answers, but that wasn't in this book. Do you guys, any of the discernment group, have anything else to add? Or even if you participated in the First Press Bible study or book study, any other comments about the book?
Just one is that we struggle with the concept of waiting because we're not people that are comfortable with waiting. And I decided that maybe it was all about listening for God. And I was okay with listening.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Sometimes when you say waiting, I think of it as kind of a negative thing of we're being complacent, and then we're going to cause us to be reactive as opposed to proactive. And so, yeah, I've struggled with the let's wait and see what happens. I don't love that.
And one of the ideas is that what we all want to do is to experience God. And in the modern world, one of the main values the modern world is built around is that the main value of something is, does it get you other things faster, right? That most of what we do it because it lets us do other things faster, which lets us do other things faster, which lets us do other things faster, thinking that more will get us more of what we really want. And so in the modern world, when we look for value, we don't really know how to look for value beyond that. And the symptom that Marley was pointing to is that the symptom that the church has picked up is we also have tried over the last 40 years to figure out ways to do more, get more, influence more, teach more, assuming that then we would experience more God. And what's happening is that people haven't experienced more God. They're just getting more burnt out. And so perhaps the way we experience God isn't through more, but through waiting together, being still, listening, hearing stories, sharing, doing life like this, and then responding when needs or feeling of I want to love there happens. And so how do we relearn how to wait? How do we relearn how to experience God as opposed to just learning how to do more, and then maybe the more will get us God down the road?
Thank you for that. So then we can go on to the next slide. The next phase in the process was really looking at our personal experiences and our personal stories, our personal whys. Why are we in the pews on Sunday? Why are we connected to our faith? How did we get started? And so we did the Vicari process, which I think some of you may have heard that process last year. I think we worked through some of it. And so we really worked hard to define who we are, what characteristics, how we prioritize ourselves, how we prioritize what's important to us. And so we really looked at why we're around the table. Is it because, like for myself, my grandparents were here, and my parents were here, and so it became a core of who I am because we were exposed to it early? Is it because you went through tragedy and loss, and that brought you needing someone and something, and so it brought you to a church? We really looked at our stories. And then the last question is, what are our non-negotiables for church? And so, that's different for all. Is it if I came to a worship service and there was no music? That would be a no-no to me. Or if it was super traditional and didn't veer and allow for creativity, maybe that's a non-negotiable for me. If there wasn't coffee and snacks at the end, maybe that's a non-negotiable for me. And so we talked about what does our church need to keep me coming. And then as, I just put our results there. Obviously, family, joy, and love were important to our discernment team. Next slide. Then we kind of got to the nuts and bolts and started talking about what our church's core values are. And even as we were doing the personal goals, we kept coming to this word of connection, connecting. No matter what we do, how we do, whether it's sitting next to you in the pews, connection was so important. Almost more, I think we all got a little uncomfortable because we're like, of our core values that we felt, we really didn't like God focus. It wasn't like faith growth or worship. Those weren't necessarily the things that made us feel warm and fuzzy. It was if we are not connected and feeling like I love the person next to me or feel the person next to me, I'm not going to be able to be as vulnerable and grow in my faith. And so we need to be connected as a group to be able to grow in our faith and support people and help them in their faith journey as well. Renewing and listening, we keep coming back to the word listening and growing. I think that's where the faith comes in, is we need to grow in our faith and grow as human beings to be the best person that we can be. And I think with all of us here in this church and at Trinity, the foundation of our Lord and the values he brings helps us grow as people as well. But we really worked through a lot of conversation, and a lot of these activities included us kind of driving down into those being our core values on our process. And those, so in the questions that you have on your paper that we're asking for feedback, we've asked if those core values resonate with you, and if they do or don't. And that's what we want to hear from you guys, is if those sound like you as well. Anything to add, group? No? Okay. Next slide. This is a blank slide. Good work, Marley. We started out the process asking those questions of, why aren't there people in the pews? Why are our pledges going down? Why is, and they were very surface area. Why are so many kids not coming to religious release? Why are so many? We don't make them feel guilty? You want to make them feel guilty? And that's one of, that was also kind of a core conversation that we had, is how many people are coming into our buildings out of obligation, because I have to read, or I have to usher, or I have to provide snacks, or I have to sing. We want to truly make sure that churches somewhere, or ministries or Bible studies are a place you want to go, not because you have to go. Is that why kids don't come? Because they were forced to come all the time? I don't know. That's a question we've asked ourselves quite a bit. But being in a space like this should be a place of peace, should be a place of calming. And sometimes I watch our busy volunteers that are help running the service. They don't look at peace. They don't look very calm. And so that's been a kind of a core question, is how do we make people feel like feeling that God presence when they walk in, and not, I got to practice my this and I practice my this to make sure I can help with the sermon. So we had to challenge ourselves with asking the questions of a little deeper. And so this was one of these, and we were just challenged with throwing any question that comes to heart that may be what's important to us, or maybe a reason why people aren't coming to church. And so we put a big laundry list, and we were told to think as outlandish as you could to as practical as you could, and anywhere in between. And so these were kind of the deeper questions that we were asking ourselves. And then we were asked, Mike's kids didn't get a hold of this and just put random sticky notes on it. We were asked to take sticky notes and ask ourselves which is the biggest question that we have, and so that's where the sticky notes kind of come in. And I believe we were also asked which one isn't as important, right? Okay, so some, I don't remember which color is which, but we really had to ask ourselves and drill down deeper what is important and what is not, and to answer those questions, and then we discussed them. And so, as we were working through these activities, I've kind of talked about like some of these core conversations, and some of these core conversations is 100% why we're here today, because I think our mind changed so much that we were starting to feel like we were kind of changing directions in our views. Like one example, the group around the table, if we're trying to, those core values became that guiding thing that we were like, well, does this project get us to our core value? We kind of kept seeing ourselves go back and forth. So one example that I think made all of us really uncomfortable, we were trying to prioritize like the ministries of Bible study, youth group, Sunday school, those kind of things, and the actual like Sunday worships. Which one's more important? And we almost, I don't think any of us wanted to say out loud because we truly felt like the ministries maybe connected us more, because a small group, you're talking more, you're learning from each other more, you're being challenged more, as opposed to Sunday service. You're sitting next to someone and you're not talking to them, you're not connecting to them, except, I don't know if you've ever experienced the First Presbyterian sharing of the peace. That's pretty connected, because if we don't get around to everyone, we're not satisfied. But, we truly were kind of uncomfortable of what is more priority. And I think none of us wanted to say that worship wasn't, because it seems like Sunday services is like the foundation of what church is. But is it getting us to that connection piece, that growth piece, if we're just listening to a 8 to 12 minute sermon silently next to somebody? And so we were really struggling. And so this picture up here correlates with these buckets right here that correlate with the chips in your hands. And so we were challenged. We were given a bunch of words on a table. And I know you can't read those, but I just wanted to be able to show the activity that we did. So we did it really slowly and really talked it out and thought about it. So there was all these words put on this table. And we were asked to go up one at a time and clump 3 words together and kind of say why we put those words together. And so I think I went first and I put like hymn, songs of praise, and choirs like put together, like that goes together. And so we were challenged to pair these words together, and the final goal was to get them into 5 buckets. 5 buckets. And so they're listed on the side. So administration is 1. And not, when I say 1, I'm not prioritizing. That's just on the top of the list right there. Administration was 1. Connection was 2. Worship, ministries, and then outreach. And so those were our final 5 categories. And then after we got to those final 5 categories, we were asked to prioritize them number 1 through 5. And we struggled with that. But I'm gonna kind of share the words, because on the coffee cans, it says the title of the category, and then all the words we had clumped in that category. So this one is ministry, and it had spiritual renewal, youth and children's ministry, pastoral visits and pastoral care, Christian education, Bible studies / small group ministry, volunteer and lay ministry, young adult ministries, elder ministry, and faith formation was all the words that we had clumped together in that group. Then outreach was connecting with the wild, good reading, Marley, connecting with wider community, service, advocacy, justice, compassion, inclusivity, evangelism, global mission and support, community organizations, and inter-religious dialogue. And so we felt like those were the greater, broader, what we do for the greater, broader community. So those were kind of our outreach. Worship, that's pretty self-explanatory, but it was worship, scripture, theology, liturgy, sacraments, preaching, spiritual growth, prayer, music, worship and praise. Connection, and that's the welcoming, belonging, fellowship, sense of community, care, generosity. And then administration is the no fun stuff. Our buildings, our staff, our financial management, our stewardship, our mission and vision, and our conflict management. So as we worked through this process, all of those words were spread out on a table, and this is how we clumped them together. Then, like I said, our goal was to try to prioritize them 1 through 5, and we struggled immensely. But we had great conversations about it. So, for example, we struggled right off the bat because a few of us felt like administration was maybe number 1, but we were kind of told not to put that as number 1, in the sense of, in some heads, your family, if you're looking at your family finances, you know what you have coming in, you know what your paycheck is, and you designate it out from there. And so if I make $100 a month, I figure out how to pay my bills with that. So I know what I can do. But we don't necessarily want the budget to dictate what we offer, how we do it, in the sense of what do we want to offer? What do our congregation members need to feel like they're growing in their faith and connecting? And then we need to challenge ourselves to do it differently. So maybe if the budget doesn't allow us to do this or that, maybe a volunteer could lead it. If we want more youth or young adult things, maybe we find a young adult that will host a group or a gathering. And so there was kind of that, do we live within our budget, or do we dream the dreams and figure out how to make it happen? And so we struggled right off the bat. But it was clear that connection was most important. If we don't feel that welcoming, that love, that sense of community, that pride, that this is our church, these are my family in my faith life, I guess I misspoke about the administration. Connection was by far the first one. We truly felt that. And then we got to ministry and worship, and I said that was a struggle to us because we started feeling like maybe the ministry is more important because that gets us to our connection a little greater and faster. I gave the analogy, sometimes I feel like worship is a little bit like going on a first date to a movie. The goal of a first date is to get to know somebody, get to connect with them, see if you have things in common, but you sit quietly at the movie and you don't talk. And so sometimes I feel like worship is a little bit like that. We sit quietly in our assigned spots that we have chosen, and we do not deviate from those. And we don't necessarily talk, we listen. And so is that connecting us? So I think some of us were changing our mind on that. Like, the foundation of church is worship, is Sunday services, and how could we ever not put that as a higher priority than ministry? But as small group things, you do kind of learn more, grow more, and build that relationship with. So we really struggled with prioritizing ministry and worship. And then the outreach, we know that's a big important thing, but we truly felt like that's not an aftermath, but that's going to be more dictated by maybe this. Okay? And so we really, and as we were getting to this point in our discernment process, this is when we truly kind of said, whoa, hold on a second. We need to make sure we are representative more of the whole congregation rather than us less than 10 folks sitting at a table. I will say that we've done a good job. You know, we have both people from First Presbyterian Church and Trinity Lutheran. We've done a very good job trying to think both, I'm going to think about First Presbyterian, but I'm going to think about both congregations as a whole. And so I don't think anybody is picking one church or the other, but we've really been thinking about the success of both congregations, but also the success of our faith in Crookston and our faith communities in Crookston. And so I think we've done a fantastic job thinking that way. But it's been a long process, and some days I leave there and I feel like I have a headache because you're thinking so much, and you're dreaming so much, and thinking about the people that you sit next to so much, and making sure that their needs are met as well. Anything else to add, team? Yes, Dan?
Just quickly,
I'd like to amplify something that Jill said about guilt. I grew up in the South where guilt was a huge motivator. We went to probably 6 or 7 different churches as I was growing up, and it seemed like I always remember feeling worse after going to church than I did before. Garrison Keeler says, that's how you get people to serve on committees, through guilt. It's a little lighthearted, but there is something to that. Well, to me, it's key to feel better after going to church than you did before you went. And that connection thing really, as a committee member, really connected with me. It's connecting with other people and caring and sharing. So again, I come back to what makes people feel good after participating in church and caring and sharing and doing things for others. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So prior to these meetings, I did make kind of a bulleted list of some of these big aha conversations that we had that I think started shifting us. And so I just want to make sure that I went through them all. We had a long conversation about what is holding people back from attending church. I think the reality of fast-paced lives, kids having sports all weekend, and Sunday being the day to kind of reset and prepare for the week ahead was a big kind of challenge. And so we had great conversations about what are holding families back from attending church or being connected to religion. We talked a lot about the peace, making sure that this is a place of peace in both buildings. We talked a great deal of, as we start thinking about what our administration in pastor time looks like, is there a reality that Trinity could maybe go towards one full-time pastor as opposed to a pastor and a half? And is that going, and part of this process is then how do we narrow our offerings and our mission to fit within those means? Because you cannot have pastors that are running around like chickens with their heads cut off and not taking that time to visit and spiritually guide and have conversations with And so we've had some discussions on how we narrow our offerings and our connections together, and what that would do to, I never want to say pledges first, but what would it do to people's ability to connect? What it would do to, would we lose members if we eliminate this or eliminate that, or add this or add that? What would that do to our membership roles? Another kind of activity that we did was, are we connected to our denominations, meaning First Pres and Trinity Lutheran, and our faith families together, or are we connected to an address? Would one of our buildings close, and what would that do, or how would it not fix that issue? And so, that idea of, are we connected to each other and our faith, or are we connected to a physical address? That has been a very big topic of conversation. One of the activities, Mike said, pretend both of our buildings on the same day blew up. I'm like, oh boy. How would you still move forward? And I think all of us got kind of excited, like, we would do concerts in the park. We would meet together and do Bible studies at a restaurant, in a park, outside, under God's nature. And so we kind of shifted to that. We might not need a building. We might not need our addresses. And then it was kind of interesting. We were doing an activity where we could put kind of anything to balance the budget. Oh, it was this. And so again, we were asked to think the most conservative or any dream. And so it was written on there to sell First Presbyterian Church. And so we kind of had the conversation, if we sell First Presbyterian Church, how does that help Trinity? How does that fix Trinity's budget? And there really wasn't an answer to that. And is it the thought that if one of the buildings were to go, that the other would flood to the other? We don't know that for sure. We don't know where people would have a choice at that point. Do they want to come to the other one in our collaboration, or do they want to wait and listen and be guided to where God calls them to next? And so we were able to dream that's not necessarily a dream to sell one of the buildings, but we were asked to think outside the box, as simple as print less paper, sell a building, rent out space for more income. We really got to kind of think outside the box to kind of put anything down. So we've done a lot of activities. One other conversation that we had quite a bit was, how do you quantify we're offering more things online? Maybe our in-person attendance is lesser, but how many people are listening to the radio? How many people are watching it on Facebook or through our websites? And so how do you quantify that? Are we reaching less, or are they just listening differently than that? But how does that also get us to our connection? Is that connecting us, or is that hindering us more? Come to conversations, those big aha conversations that we've been having through this process. Again, we don't have all the answers for you today, but I just wanted to make sure that we kind of shared those aha moments. But I want to give plenty of time for feedback, for comments. Let's start out with, what questions do you have? Because this is where we've kind of ended in our process. And so now is when we felt like we needed to come to you for feedback. So let's start with, do you have any questions on the process that we've gone through so far? Yeah.
You mentioned listening as part of this process. And at what point will we, both people from both congregations, have opportunities to share our thoughts on this. And, I'm already ready to argue with Dan about his experience.
To answer your question on when are we going to start listening, right here, right now. This is when we're listening, but we've also been listening to each other on the discernment team, and that's why we're supposed to be represented of everybody at the in the congregations. And so we're listening to each other at the table. We're listening to the Lord. Mike and Pastor Greg have very much been trying to, here's the activity, you guys talk about it. They're very much trying to give us the tools and the activities, and it pains them, you can see it on their face, but they want us to drive these answers, not them to feed us these answers. So we've been listening to each other. That's why we're here, is we do want to hear from you guys, and that's why we're trying to make sure that there's multiple ways for you to be able to give feedback. If you want to shout it out right now, but not everybody's comfortable with that. If you want to write it on those pieces of paper, rock on, and you can leave them at the church offices, or else there's a lockbox in front of Trinity. You can put them there. And there's also, you can take that survey online as well. We will be here afterwards, so you can chit-chat with any of us on the discernment committee or with Pastor Mike and Pastor Greg. So now is the listening. Yes.
Thinking of us closing, are we always going to be combined with Trinity all the time? What about Methodists? What is our backgrounds in way back? I'm just wondering what Trinity, what their beliefs are, what our beliefs are, basically. Just a bunch of questions. I'm wondering why we chose what we're doing.
Are we looking at closing the churches, one of the churches? I would love to say that as absolutely no. I mean, I don't think any of us would come to that decision lightly. And as far as, there would be a lot more questions and more of a process if one of them did close. Yes, I would love that.
The idea is, let's say that's an idea. The proposal team would take that idea, work through a process, and they said, if we close the church, then we would do this, it would be this, it would mean this, it would mean this, it would mean this, right? Kind of do that exploration of what that option would be. Not saying that this is what we're going to do, but here's that option, here's what it would mean. And then there'd be another one, if we stayed in the church, and stayed in the building, and didn't change anything, here's that option, here's what it would mean and what we'd have to do, right? And so the discernment team isn't making a decision. We are coming up with options, thinking through it, so then we can hand those back to church leadership and to the congregations to have a stepping off place for them to decide themselves. And so this group isn't deciding anything. The congregations will decide it. We're just giving, here's some options to start off from.
We also had a group that decided we wanted to go door to door and knock on doors and talk to people about a little bit about our religion and what they, cared, and which was a good thing, I thought. I don't know if we want to get into all this. How much do we really want to keep our church?
That was also discussed. We talked about, if we put a proposal like that together, how do we recruit more? How do we get more butts in the seat? Again, we don't have answers because we haven't dug into truly exploring any option. We're still putting the feedback of what we feel. And yeah. And even at Trinity, we heard stories of, the reason I'm here is because this person asked me and my family to attend. So we heard beautiful stories like that on Thursday this past week, of just asking people to come and getting connected and established at a church. One of the conversations the discernment group had was, that is hard to do because religion is very private, kind of more so than it used to be. And so that door-to-door is, there's just so much. It's Yep. Very, very much something we can explore. Any other comments, questions? Yes?
Yeah, I'm Leah Windjam from over at Trinity, and first of all, I just want to say thank you for each one of you that said yes to this discernment process and all the time you've put in and your heart that you invested and just staying faithful to the process, because I know it hasn't been easy, and well done with everything you've shared with us today. But what I wanted to share was, or an ask was, I think it was so wise of you to come up to where we're at right now on your own, saying, all right, these are what we've said, but we need to hear from others. So grateful that we're being able to share our perspectives and backgrounds and opinions. And this is impressive how many we have here today, and I know on Thursday, there was a good group at Trinity. However, there's still a lot of people out there that it's summertime and are maybe not in tune to these great conversations and the importance and value of what this discernment process is. And to go back to how you started, Marley, it's now more important than ever. So how are we going to reach out? And maybe you guys, I know you have a QR code, and I'm sure it'll be posted, but how can we help get the word out, I guess, is my question. Door to door. And I do want to share one more thing before you answer the question, sorry, is that, again, many people think, oh, isn't this timing so great? The pastors must have known. But working very closely with both of these pastors, this was an idea that was long before what we are hearing now about each of them having new paths in front of them. And so, though it may seem like, oh, this was planted for this purpose, and yes, it was, but not by the pastors. I truly feel this was Spirit-led, and God who put these conversations, these people in place, and now, again, we're needing it more than ever. So thank you again.
That's, I don't know if we've thought about, we've thought about it in the sense that's why we're recording things, that's why we're, could we email it out, could we make a bulleted highlight thing, that's why there's multiple ways for you to give feedback. I don't know if I have a great answer to that.
Yeah, I think beyond sending a letter to everyone on our rolls, to putting it online, to putting the recordings online, to putting any feedback that you guys give out to folks, I'm not sure there's much else that we can do. We do have a built-in timeline, and we need to have this process done. So yeah, I'm not sure there's much else we can do other than going door to door or chasing people down to their lake houses, if anyone wants to. We need everyone's answers to those questions by the end of this coming week. Okay, so you have a week to do it, yeah. Yeah.
The discernment group had a hope of giving proposals by the end of June. I don't know if with the pastor leadership change, because that's going to change a lot, that's going to maybe put a little extra work into this committee. And so I don't know if that's as realistic as it once was. I think there's still a hope, but there's a lot of unknown pieces to this puzzle now. And so the June deadline, hopefully, but it seems far-fetched as well. Yes?
In these kinds of processes, the thing that's hard for the people that haven't been on the committee is you're like light years ahead. So for everybody in the audience, I don't know about everybody else, but it sort of feels like an assault on the senses. There's just too much out there right now. So I think the idea of submitting information when people have had a time to reflect, and maybe then sharing those reflections as another point in the journey would be good.
And that's actually the plan. We want to make sure that we haven't gone light years ahead and find out that everyone else we've zigged way out here and find out that everyone else has zagged, right? And just to get that feedback to see if we feel like the Spirit's moving this way and suddenly see that for everyone else, it's actually, there's a different main value or something else that's moving in another direction, and we need to shift and change our thinking, is the main reason for the listening group, these listening sessions and getting feedback from you. So it's not like, oh, you should tell us what the next step should be. It's, you should tell us, we want to see from you the direction that you're thinking and feeling to make sure that the Spirit is taking us all at least a little bit in the same direction, right? And the proposals that we're making are details of how we can go in that direction together. Does that make sense? And then also, the plan is to compile all the feedback that we get and also have it online and in different places where everyone can see. Does that answer what?
One thing I want to say, I know it's kind of alarming that, or maybe not alarming, but shocking that the first question on your feedback form is your name. And so I want to kind of tell you why we did that. So if we're going to ask you for this great feedback, and one of the last questions, how do you help overcome these challenges? If somebody writes down a huge aha moment or a huge this is a great idea, we want to be able to come back to you and have a conversation about it and flush out that idea a little bit more to greater scaffold on that idea. And so it's not to be able to sit there and be like, look how dumb Annette is. That's not the reason for it at all. We just want to be able to look at those ideas and say, this one has merit. This one's got a lot of merit to it. Let's go and talk to the person that wrote it. So that's why the first question is your name. Any other questions?
I'm following up a little bit with what Lori said. It's kind of overwhelming. It's huge. Well, and we've known that. We haven't had our heads in the sand. We have been thinking about it. But I'm realizing today that I need more information about how other churches have met this kind of challenge. And I know that they're everywhere. Churches are closing in both denominations out in the rural areas, and we're rural. And so I want to gather more information so that if the Spirit is speaking to me, that, I will understand. I need more information. I know there is a Presbyterian way of closing churches, by the way, that we haven't even looked at.
And we haven't looked at that because that's not one of the main questions so far, right? The question is, what do you value most? What could church do that if it grew, if it became a lot better, if we did it a lot better, we would be okay letting the other stuff go to give more time and space for this part to grow, right? What is the extra stuff on the ship versus what is the thing that gives our congregations life and we need to protect and continue to nurture going forward? If that answer is the building, then everything will shift towards how do we save the building, right? And everything else is secondary. If that answer is, our congregation worshiping together each Sunday, then we focus on making that happen, and do we need a building for that? What is actually necessary for that life, the life of that to grow, right? And so it's not a question of just how do we fix the budget or how do we fill in all the gaps that make it work now. It's a question of what is the thing that gives life most to our congregations, that we feel God moving through the most. And then how do we protect, grow, and nurture that? And what do we let go of in order to do that? And so I'm not sure we need to know what everyone else is doing, because this isn't a strategic plan. This is a spiritual process for us as a community. What matters the most? What matters the most?
The fact that anything we say about tonight is not heard by the people that are watching.
Yeah. So just to kind of narrow us here for time, is there any other questions about the process that we have? Marley, do we want to pick one or two questions and
Let's first kind of like just discuss what the questions are asking you. So the first one is, how did the values that proposal team shared, do they resonate with you? So that's those connections, the welcoming, the renewing, the listening, and the growth. Does that feel like that fits you? Does that feel like that's something you resonate with? That's what that first question is asking. How might our churches faithfully respond to the challenges and values shared today? So, that's do you have a great idea of how to fix either the lack of people, the budget downfall, the people not prioritizing faith or not being able to get there on on Sunday mornings? Do you have ideas to that? What matters most to you when you think about the church directions going forward? What do you prioritize in your God experience? So when we were talking about the personal values, I said, what are those non-negotiables? That's what that question is asking. What are your non-negotiables when it comes to church and the direction we're going? And then the fourth question is, how would you like to help build connection and community in the church through current opportunities or ones needing to be created? What holds you back? And so that is asking, soul search a little bit in yourself. Are you willing to host a group of some sort, a men's group, a young adult group? Are you willing to host something like that? And I know many of you are doing a bunch of things too. Many of you sit on a council, many of you read, many of you sing, many of you help with finances, so we all have a role, and I think it's important to put those on. But there might be people out in the congregations that are willing to do more, but maybe the thing that's holding them back is, I've got 2 kids at home. I would be willing to do this, but I need help with my children, and so, tell us your skills and talents, or tell us what you're currently doing. I'm currently a deacon. I'm currently doing this. But also dream about what we could do more to help reach this vision as well. So with those 4 questions kind of said, I give this an opportunity for you to share your thoughts and feelings on any one of those questions.
I just wanted to mention, because people have time to give us that written feedback online or with these pieces of paper, the page that's got blue on it, that's got a very nice brief listing of, it's a starting purpose statement. How do our congregations need to change in order to have a specific mission-focused structure, things like that, because we're looking at renewal, not just fixing. Looking at that, and then repeated themes of our stories, values that came up from everything we were talking about, and that we keep hearing people from church meetings and other places talking about as well. In the bottom section, values, we want proposals to move church toward. So these are good to keep with you when you're going to answer those questions.
Anybody want to share their thoughts to one of these questions. That's what the point of this is. So.
It says up there, what matters most to you when you think about the church going in what direction? I say the organ. And plus being born and baptized here and all that stuff. But the organ is really good, and a good minister too. There you go.
So what matters most to me is the continuation of youth participating and attending. Because I think if we don't focus on the youth, number one, we want to, right? To help build their faith and grow knowing that there is somebody they can count on the rest of their lives when they're struggling. So we want that, but from the aspect of churches continuing, I think focusing on the youth for me is a priority. And then the last thing I want to say is I feel it's kind of heavy right now. And this should be like, it's a very, very exciting time for all of us. As hard as it is to lose Mike and how difficult it is to lose Greg, we have the opportunity to decide what direction we want to go. And that is exciting. We are starting fresh. And so this becomes so important, and ideas, I think, are appreciated.
I'm gonna give one question. When you say youth, so then I'm just gonna pose a question, because we do this all the time. Does that need to be a formal confirmation process? That's a question, does that make it hard for families? Those are the kind of questions we throw around. Like, does it need to be a formal, every Wednesday thing that families struggle to get to? Or do we rethink that? So, any other feedback to these questions? Or maybe you all want to share them in private on pen and paper or keyboard. That's fine too.
I was looking at, what matters most, and I guess the reason that I'm here and that I wanted to, I think it is a kind of a new start here for us now. We can look at doing things differently, and for me, I guess I wanted to come and I wanted to just kind of learn and hear about maybe what is important to us and what are things that we can work together to do to accomplish those goals. And there's probably some things that we can't work together on, and there are hopefully many things that we can work together on, and that's my hope out of this whole process.
Or a statement, however you want to take it. But one of my concerns with our church, and I grew up Lutheran. I changed to Presbyterian. I love our church. I love our church family. And also, my parents are here in the Columbarium. And, yeah.
Those are all things we have to think through and think about. I think even our session has even tipped on that a little bit. Like, if we were to close this building, how do we do that? And I believe there is writing on how that would happen. Am I making that up, Craig? You might know that. The yes. And so we've briefly kind of talked that would have to be something we address, and we know that. We don't know necessarily what that process is. That would have to be working with the ICOFs significantly to figure out what happens, how we relocate that. If this building were to close. Not that it is, not that we know that for sure. Well, if the,
We run on about a 30 to 40 grand deficit. The sustainability of our budget in paying for the building and all its needs, it has a timeline, right? If our expenditures stay. There's also the question of finding a new pastor, right? Does our congregation want and plan to go through a full call process to find a new pastor? If they do, does Trinity still feel like they have the financial means and desire to split a full-time position? If not, is there a part-time person who is going to be able to be willing to fill that in, right? And so they're very practical limitations and questions. Both congregations cannot just continue to do what they've been doing because numbers and budgets won't allow it. And so we need to decide within the reality of our resources, what do we want to give our attention to, over the next 5 years? Do we have a plan for getting more resources so the other things don't change? Or do we want to use the resources that we have in a different way? And that's why the question of values is so important, right? We're just about out of time, right? By the structure of the Presbyterian policy and just because of ethics, right, I don't have a say in what First Pres does going forward. I cannot, I should not, I will not, right? Say, you guys should do X, Y, and Z. I have been helping to lead this process because I would like both congregations to have an intentional steps for making those decisions so that we can't kick it down the road anymore. That's the worst thing we could do. We're not kicking this decision down the road, right? We need to make choices. And those choices need to be made because this is what we want to invest in. This is where the life of our congregation can come from. That way, we know all the stuff that is secondary, right? If it threatens it. But with those things in mind, we can choose a very hopeful future, right? If worshiping together as a congregation is the most important thing, or if mission is the most important thing, and this is like for First Pres, right? Then maybe a possibility is to find another congregation to move into this building and we sell it to them. And then the building still exists, the columbarium still runs, and First Presbyterian has a budget, and they nest in Trinity Lutheran. But they still continue to worship, and Trinity allows us to use their office resources and things like that, so we have much lower cost. And First Presbyterian gets to dream about what to do with a large endowment that they don't have a need for to run, and what kind of mission and joyous activities and giving and spaces can you create with that, right? It becomes a playground, like a holy playground, to do whatever you want as a community, right? I mean, sure, we can play with that as well. But the idea, and I think what Ned was pointing to, is that if we decide what is most important, right? This thing is most important, then everything else is just the stuff on the boat, right? And so we invest in what gives life. And that's where life will come from. But we need to be aware of what that thing is. And if we're trying to hang on to everything, we will do it until individuals decide, this is a sinking ship, I'm out of here, right? And then it just kind of splinters, and we're like, let everyone just do whatever they want. But within Acts, and I think within the life of the church, and within our life as spiritual people, I don't think our answer can be let individuals do whatever they want. I think life will come from what will we commit to doing together, and how will we commit to it together? Because we believe that's where the Spirit is leading, and we believe that we will feel the life of God within it. And so if it's youth, then we start thinking seriously about how to invest in youth, right? And maybe a second pastor role isn't necessary. So then there's room in the budget to think about hiring individuals for smaller jobs that invest in a larger youth program or larger youth outreach, right? Or literally, we get to be creators, not just protectors. And a large part of this process and a large part of the spiritual process of church going forward is, how do we learn how to be creators and not just protectors of the blessings that God has given us? The last 100 years in America, church has been incredibly blessed. We have huge endowments, and we have schools, and we have institutions. Amazing. That privilege is going away. So how do we take what has been a blessing and not let it become a curse as we try and hold on to it, but let it become a blessing for others, and we get to enjoy the giving of it and the creating with it? This is a process. Just like for the discernment group, it's been a process. Because the call of God is not in an answer that we get, it's in the change that we're willing to go through in the journey, which I know is a cliche, but it's just true. And so for you, as you write down on these papers, dream a little. Dream a little. Even if your suggestion might risk something, so you can think of the person who will be insulted. Dream a little. Or, as it says in Acts and in Joel, in the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Even upon my slaves, both men and women, in those days I will pour out my spirit, and they shall prophesy, and I will show portents in the heavens above, and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and smoke and mist. And the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the Lord's great and glorious day. I don't think he's just talking about the end of time. I think he's talking about what happens every time the Spirit moves. I don't care how old you are, and I don't think the Spirit cares either, because young men will dream dreams, or young men will have visions, and old men will dream dreams. You all can dream dreams. But it will also come with what feels like blood and smoke. Right? This isn't because something is wrong. This is the cycle of death and resurrection. And if we're going to call ourselves Christians, we're going to be a part of it. And we're going to participate. And no one's going to try and jump off the boat. Is it okay if we end there? Yes.
One last thing. So yes, you have some tokens, some chips that play a certain game. And so we are asking that you guys take a moment, and as you've listened, there's coffee cans here. And so we encourage you, the blue token would be your number one priority. Put it in that bucket. Do you feel like you prioritize administration, connection, worship, outreach, or ministries? So your number one priority is blue, because blue is for winner. And then the red, which is usually second place in ribbons, put your second place one where you would put that. And so blue is your first priority, red is your second priority, and that's going to help us see what you guys value and what you guys prioritize, and that would help us greatly. So yes, prayer.